Hey, this is Mr. Ward, and I hope you are enjoying the wintry mix today. And here's your do now 29.3 for geometry. So I will be the key. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. So, no calculators, please. You can definitely solve these without one. And if you're not sure how to do it, you can write questions, of course. Now, of course, we're going to be doing is we want to turn this into factors, into two things times each other that equals zero, because then it'll be easy to solve this. So we just factor out an x from both things. Then factoring an x out of x squared leaves an x. Factoring an x out of minus 4 leaves a minus 4x leaves a minus 4. And that will equal 0. And then we can just find out what x values would make either one of these factors 0. Well, if x is 0, that's 0 times whatever this is. So x can be 0. And if x was 4, x minus 4 would be 0. So whatever that is times 0 will be 0. So x can be 0 and 4. Well, let's try this one now. This one's messier. So the first thing we got to do is we got to put everything on one side. We want to make this equal 0 so that then we can factor it. So let's do all of that. So I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides. So I'm going to end up with 2x squared. Then I'm going to subtract, so x squared from 3x squared makes 2x squared. 8x from 5x makes negative 3x. Then 28 from negative 7 makes negative 35. And then they'll all equal 0. Now we've got to deal with the fact that this is a mess. This is a very ugly factoring situation, but we can make it easier and less ugly. So I'm going to start off by making the old x. So since I have this lead coefficient of 2, I need to deal with that in the mix. So I'm going to have 2 times negative 35 up here. Okay, and then I'm going to put a multiplication thing, and this becomes, of course, negative 70. It may be useful to think about the fact that negative 35 is going to involve a negative 1 and a 7 and a 5. Then down here, I need to work out two numbers that multiply to negative 70, but add to negative 3. And in fact, there are two that'll work rather nicely. Negative 10 and positive 7. Now, this is messier than something that leads with a coefficient of 1, so I can't just put parentheses around these, say x minus and x plus. Won't quite work like that. But I can still use this negative 10 and this 7. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to rewrite this equation. And I'm going to take this negative 3x, and I'm going to change it into a negative 10x plus 7x. And that's the same thing as negative 3x. Now that I've done that, I can do some grouping. So I'm going to group the first two things here, 2x squared minus 10x, and the last two parts, 7x minus 35. And my next step is going to be to find out what's the greatest common factor for each of these. My hope is that I'll end up with something in the parentheses here that is the same as what's in the parentheses here. So let's see what I can do. So I can pull a 2 out of each of these. So I'll put a 2 here, and that makes this to a 1, and this negative 10 and negative 5. And I can also factor an x out of both terms because they're both times some x's. X squared will become x, and negative 5x will just become negative 5 when I factor an x out. So there, cool. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is look for common factors here. Well, 7 seems to do the job. So I'll factor a 7 out of 7x, becomes x. I'll factor a 7 out of negative 35, it becomes negative 5. And now look at that. I've got x minus 5 and x minus 5 again, which means that I can factor this as x minus 5 times 2x plus 7 equals 0. And now I have what I need to be able to figure out what x would be. Because if I can figure out what x value would make x minus 5 0, and what x value would make 2x plus 7 equal to 0, I'll know what x is. So x equals 5. That's one thing that's fairly straightforward, because 5 minus 5 is 0, and the whole thing will be 0, because 0 times anything is 0. Then I got to figure out what x value would make 2x plus 7 equals 0. So this one I'm going to go ahead and do the old two-step equation thing. I'll subtract 7 from both sides, so 2x will be negative 7. And then I'll divide both sides by 2, so x will be negative 7 over 2. So those are my solutions. X can be 5, and x can be negative 7 halves. So x is 5 and negative 7 halves. Those are the answers for that. Okay, now we got this one here. Again, we're going to have to get everything on one side. So let's do that first. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. That'll be 2x squared from both sides. That'll be 6x squared. I'll subtract 6x from those sides. So that will end up being negative 7x minus 6x will be negative 13x. And then I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. So 9 minus 7 will be plus 2. And it'll all equal 0. And once again, it looks messy. So we're going to have to make our nice little x. This is actually not going to be as horrible as it looks. So I'm going to have 6 times 2. 6 times 2, which is 12. So I'm going to need 2 factors of 12 that add up to negative 13. All right, so my 2 factors are going to have to be negative to get a positive number. So I have a negative here and a negative here. Well, what are 2 factors of 12 that add up to positive 13? 1 and 12. So I'll say 1 and 12, like that. And now I can start to reorganize my equation using this negative 1 and negative 12. And here's where they're going to come in. I'm going to take the negative 13x, I'm going to break it into negative 1x and negative 12x, like that. I'm going to copy pasta that into the next row, and I'm going to use factoring by grouping. So I'm going to group this thing, and I'm going to group this thing. Now, you might notice I'm intentionally grabbing that negative for inside the grouping, and I'll just put a plus here. That'll help me keep track of my signs. Now I'm going to take that, and I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor for each of these. So the greatest common factor here is just going to be x. So I'll factor in x out of that, because I'm not going to be able to get any greatest common factors out of 6 and 1. X out of x will be just that. They'll go away. And over here, I can factor out a negative 2 from both of these. A negative 2, that's going to become a 6. And that's going to become a 1. Now, if you'd factored out a positive 2, then you would have ended up negative 6x plus 1, which clearly has a negative relationship to 6x minus 1. So then you just go ahead and factor out a negative, and they would match up. Okay, so now we've got the same factor here and the same factor here, so we can break it up into 6x minus 1 times x minus 2. So x is going to be, and this has to equal 0, of course. So x is going to be 2 from the x minus 2, but then the 6x minus 1, if you say 6x minus 1 equals 0, we can find out what x value would make it equal 0. So we add 1 to both sides, so 6x equals 1, and then we divide both sides by 6, so x will equal 1 over 6. So my solutions are 2. So x is 2 and 1/6, both of those things, and x is. Last one here, and I realize this is a longer thing, but this is important for you to review. So remember that the cross products of a proportion are going to be the same. So what I can do is I can say x plus 1 times 2x minus 4 and 7 times 3x minus 3. So I'm going to do that. So it's going to be 7 times 3x minus 3, and that's going to equal x plus 1 times 2x plus 4. And I've got to simplify everything. That'll be 21x minus 21 is going to equal, okay, x times 2x will be 2x squared. X times 4 will be 4x. 1 times 2x will be 2x. And 1 times 4 will be 4. Now I want to move everything to one side. I'm going to find it useful just visually to do this. Put this equal sign stuff on the other side, like that. I'm going to combine my like terms as I can. The 4x and the 2x are going to become a 6x. Then I'm going to add 21 to both sides. That's going to make this a 27x. I'm sorry. Yeah, 27x. And I'm going to add 21 to both sides, so that'll be a 25. And this will equal 0. Now I'm going to make my initial x like this and like this. And so I need a 2 times 25, so that's 2 times 25 will be 50. And down here I need a 27. So I need two factors of 50 that add up to 27. Well, that's not actually that hard. 2 and 25 will do the job. So we can start sorting this out. So I've got this equation here. I'm going to copy it here. And I'm going to replace 27x with 2x plus 25x. Now I'm going to group things. I'll group this. And I'll group this. And I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to figure out what can I pull out of 2x squared plus 2x. Well, I can pull out a 2x. So 2x. So that will become just that. 2 goes away. The x squared becomes x. And 2x divided by 2x will be 1. Now, what can I pull out of 25x plus 25? Well, I can pull out 25. 25 becomes 25x just becomes 25. Just becomes x. And the 25 divided by 25 just becomes 1. And now I have the same factor here. And I can break it down into x plus 1 times 2x plus 25 equals 0. And let me scroll down a hair. And we have x equals -1, because -1 would make x plus 1 equals 0. And I'm going to take 2x plus 25 and make it equal 0 to find out what x would be for that one. So 2x will equal 25 over 20 equal -25, because I subtracted 25 from both sides. And then x will equal -25 over 2. And so my answer is x equals -1 and x equals -25 over 2. And there you go. I hope that